Welcome to another podcast episode brought to you by AGS Agriculture Global Solutions, where we discuss sustainable oil palm cultivation topics. Today, we're focusing on how adjusting the planting density of oil palms on different soils, combined with the wise use of fertilizers, fundamentally changes the performance of an estate. So stick around as we translate some incredible new data into field-ready strategies.
Because, for those of you managing plantations, you already know the frustration of that generational waiting game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you want to test if tightening up your spacing by just a meter will boost your output.
Or if it'll just cause the palms to shade each other out, right?
Exactly. Historically, to get a real-world answer, you couldn't just simulate it in an afternoon. You basically had to plant a block, wait for it to mature, and study the harvest for 20 to 30 years.
Which is just an operational nightmare.
It really is. By the time you get the results from a 25-year field trial, the regional climate has shifted, your average rainfall has changed, and, well, the agricultural landscape is completely different. Yeah, the data you waited decades to collect is practically obsolete the moment you finalize the report.
Right. And that delayed feedback loop is exactly what we are tackling today.
Yeah, so let's discuss a 2024 research article published in the journal Helion. It's by Christopher Boone Songtae, Shang Che, and Harikrishna Kulavarasingam, titled Development and Validation of an Oil Palm Model for a Wide Range of Planting Densities and Soil Textures in Malaysian Growing Conditions.
And as we sit here in 2026, this study is 2 years old, but the operational model it introduced, called SAWIT.JEIEL, is really just starting to impact how estate managers make everyday decisions.
It represents a massive leap in how we forecast field performance. Our goal today is to break down how this model works, not as some abstract academic exercise, but, as a practical tool.
Right. We'll discuss how it simulates the physical environment, how it calculates water loss and nutrient needs, and most importantly, how you can use these principles to optimize your own planting densities and fertilizer applications.
So let's start with the core problem of the older computer models. Because we've had software to simulate crop growth for decades, right? Like AppSim, SimPalm, EcoPalm.
Yeah, quite a few.
So why completely from the ground up? My understanding is that the older systems relied heavily on historical empirical data rather than the actual biology of the palm.
That is the crux of the issue, exactly. Older models operated on statistical correlations. They basically just looked at past data and created empirical equations.
Like a hard-coded formula.
Pretty much. They programmed the software to say, when a palm receives a certain amount of solar radiation, we historically see this specific amount of vegetative growth. It's a mathematical shortcut.
I mean, I'm struggling to see the problem with that, though. If you have 40 years of historical data showing that X amount of sunlight equals Y amount of growth, why wouldn't you just use that formula to plan your estate?
Well, because an empirical model only works if the future looks exactly like the past. It doesn't understand why the tree is growing. It only knows the historical trend.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, suppose you introduce a completely novel variable. Let's say you test a planting density of 180 palms per hectare, which you've never done before, and the region gets hit with a heat wave that's 2 degrees hotter than your historical average.
The empirical model would just completely break down.
It completely breaks down. It blindly calculates growth based on the old sunlight correlation, totally oblivious to the fact that the palms are biologically suffocating from the heat.
And competing viciously for water. That makes me think of the difference between an old 8-bit video game and a modern simulation.
How so?
Like if you play a game from the 1980s, there's no real physics happening behind the screen. There's just a hard-coded rule. If you press the jump button, the character moves up exactly 10 pixels every single time.
That is a very apt comparison. The old crop models were essentially operating on those 8-bit hard-coded rules.
But SAWIT.JL is a semi-mechanistic model. So it's like upgrading to a modern, fully physics-based digital engine where it actually calculates gravity, wind resistance, friction, and mass in real time. So if you drop a digital object onto completely untested terrain, the physics engine still knows exactly how it should bounce because it understands the fundamental laws of motion.
Right, and ScoreIt.jl is doing that for biology. It simulates the actual meteorology, the energy balance of the canopy, the soil-water dynamics, and the mechanics of photosynthesis.
It computes the biological reality rather than just referencing a historical spreadsheet.
Yeah, and to understand how that changes your field strategy, we really have to look at how SORIT.jl handles the plant's breathing and sweating. Let's talk about photosynthesis first.
Okay.
Instead of a flat sunlight to energy conversion, this model uses something called the Farquhar C3 biochemical model to track the kinetics of the Rubisco enzyme.
I want to stop you there because Rubisco sounds like something we leave to the lab technicians.
Hmm.
I mean, how does an enzyme's kinetics translate to a decision an estate manager makes in the field?
It translates directly to temperature management and yield expectations. Rubisco is the enzyme responsible for grabbing carbon dioxide from the air so the palm can synthesize sugar, but it is incredibly temperature sensitive.
Okay, so the older models would see a bright, cloudless, intensely hot day and predict massive growth because solar radiation was high.
Exactly. But Sawit.jl understands that once the canopy temperature crosses a specific threshold, the Rubisco enzyme physically struggles. The biochemical process stalls.
Meaning, on the hottest days of the year, the palm isn't maximizing production at all, it's actually shutting down defensively.
Defensively, yes.
So if a manager is relying on old empirical data, they might look at a sunny month and expect a bumper crop, but the mechanistic reality is that the extreme heat just stalled the cellular engine.
Precisely. And that ties directly into how the palm sweats, which brings us to evapotranspiration, or ET. ET is the total water lost to the atmosphere, both from the palm transpiring and the soil evaporating. Older models usually use the Penman-Monteith method, which had a glaring operational blind spot. It typically only accounted for evaporative water loss from the canopy or the soil. It rarely calculated both concurrently.
Wait, hold on. You're saying previous estate modeling tools completely ignored the water evaporating off the bare dirt between the palms?
In many cases, yes. They treated the plantation as a single, uniform surface.
That seems like a catastrophic oversight. I mean, we don't plant palms shoulder to shoulder like wheat. Even at a standard density of 136 or 148 palms per hectare, there are massive avenues of exposed earth.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're trying to calculate the water budget of a block and you ignore the sun baking the bare soil in the avenues, your drought predictions are going to be wildly inaccurate.
You'd be operating on completely false assumptions. Sawit.jl fixes this by using the Shuttleworth-Wallace model, which calculates concurrent heat fluxes.
So it looks at the whole microclimate.
Yes. It constantly evaluates the microclimate, the wind speed slicing through the avenues, the humidity trapped under the fronds, the shading on the ground, and calculates the exact volume of water evaporating from the exposed dirt at the exact same time the canopy is transpiring.
And this directly impacts decisions on cover crops and mulching. Like, if you run this mechanistic model and realize that bare soil evaporation is draining 30% of your block's water during a dry spell,
Then investing in a robust legume cover crop isn't just about nitrogen fixation anymore.
right, it's about physically shielding your water reserves from the sun.
It completely reframes how you look at the floor of your plantation. And to replace all that water lost to the atmosphere, the palm obviously has to pull it from the earth.
Yeah, and the researchers incorporated a really fascinating structural reality into Sawit.jl regarding root extraction. It utilizes the 4-3-2-1 rule.
Right, I know you were reading up on this.
Yeah, I was reading the documentation on this. Field measurements show that oil palm roots don't just suck water evenly from the entire root zone.
No, they don't.
If you slice the soil profile into 4 equal horizontal layers, the roots extract exactly 40% of their water from the top quarter. They pull 30% from the second quarter, 20% from the third, and a mere 10% from the deepest layer.
It's a highly stratified extraction pattern. And from an operational standpoint, programming this 40-30-20-10 ratio into the software is critical for irrigation and fertilizer placement.
I can see why. I mean, if 70% of the palm's total water uptake is happening in the top half of the root zone, a light passing shower is incredibly effective at reviving a stressed palm because the bulk of the active roots are sitting right there near the surface.
Exactly. But conversely, it means a short-term surface drought hits the palm disproportionately hard, even if there is moisture deep down.
Right. By the way, since we are talking about root extraction and nutrient uptake, soil testing for acidity and nutrient content is essential alongside regular leaf testing.
Absolutely. You need to ensure that the profile you're managing actually has the chemical balance the roots need to function. You can perfectly calculate the water dynamics, but if the soil is too acidic, those surface roots aren't taking up the fertilizer anyway.
Which perfectly transitions us to the next massive upgrade in this model. How the palm spends its energy once it successfully pulls that water and synthesizes those sugars.
Right.
Because before a palm can focus on producing a fresh fruit bunch, or FFB, it has a daily metabolic tax it has to pay just to stay alive.
We refer to this as maintenance respiration. It's the caloric burn required simply to maintain the existing cellular structure of the roots, the trunk, and the fronds.
And if you get the maintenance respiration wrong in your model,
Your yield predictions will be disastrous.
it's like calculating the resting metabolic rate of a human. I mean, I'd burn a certain amount of calories just keeping my heart beating, even if I never get off the couch.
Exactly. And in these advanced agricultural models, calculating the resting metabolic rate requires mapping the exact nitrogen content in different organs of the plant.
Because nitrogen drives the protein structures.
Yes, and proteins require constant energy to maintain. So you know the exact nitrogen distribution in the leaflets, the rachees, the trunk, and the roots. You can calculate the daily energy drain.
But the researchers found a major flaw in how the industry was doing this, didn't they? The old software was basing its nitrogen calculations on the Durapalm.
Yes, which is practically ancient history for modern commercial estates. The Dur variety has largely been phased out in favor of the Tenera crossbreed.
Right, because Tenera has a thinner shell, a thicker mesocarp, and significantly higher oil potential.
Exactly.
So using Dura data to model a Tenera plantation is like trying to calculate the daily caloric needs of a modern Olympic sprinter using the medical charts of a 1950s bodybuilder.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. They are completely different biological machines with different metabolic engines.
So what did the developers do?
The developers of Sowit.jl went out into the field and conducted extensive updated measurements of the nitrogen partitioning specifically for modern Tenera palms.
That's a lot of field work.
Oh, was. They mapped the nutrient distribution across multiple age brackets, from one-year-old immature palms to massive 20-year-old trees. They basically built a precise nitrogen map of the modern commercial crop.
I want to emphasize why this matters so much for fertilizer management. Like, if an older model overestimates the maintenance cost of the trunk, it might tell a manager that the palm needs significantly more nitrogen than it actually does just to survive.
Right, and then the manager follows the recommendation, over-applies fertilizer, wastes thousands of dollars per hectare, and risks severe leaching.
Or the reverse happens. The model underestimates the daily energy cost. Compounded over a 25-year life cycle, a fraction of percent of error means the model thinks the palm has massive surplus energy to push into fruit production.
Yeah, the manager expects a massive yield, under-fertilizes, and the palms end up physically starving, pulling nutrients out of their older fronds just to survive.
Wow. So wise use of fertilizers requires knowing the exact metabolic baseline of the Tenera palm, which is what this update provides. So we have a digital tool that adjusts photosynthesis based on enzyme temperature thresholds, calculates exposed dirt evaporation alongside canopy transpiration, models root water uptake at a 40-30-20-10 ratio, and accurately taxes the palm's energy based on the nitrogen map of a modern Tenera.
It's very comprehensive.
It sounds bulletproof on paper. But as any field manager will tell you, the real test is whether it actually works in the dirt. How did Sowit.jl perform during validation?
The validation phase was rigorous. They tested the model against historical field data from 7 diverse commercial estates across peninsular Malaysia.
They didn't take it easy on the model then.
Not at all. They deliberately pushed it to its limits by selecting sites with wildly different soil textures, specifically testing it on heavy inceptisols and sandy altisols. They also looked at palms across the entire age spectrum, from 1 to 23 years old.
But the most important variable they tested was the planting density, right? Because the standard estate is usually sitting somewhere between 136 and 148 palms per hectare. But the validation data they fed into Sowit.jl ranged from incredibly sparse layouts of 82 palms per hectare all the way up to a suffocating 299 palms per hectare.
Which is huge.
Yeah, why even test a density of 299? No commercial operation plants that tightly. It would just be a jungle of etiolated trunks fighting for light.
You test the extremes to ensure the mechanistic engine doesn't break. If the model can accurately predict the severe yield crash and the intense water stress that occurs at 299 palms per hectare, it proves that the mathematical relationships governing canopy shading and root competition are fundamentally sound.
Ah, that makes sense. And the results were highly encouraging.
Very. The model performed exceptionally well at predicting the ultimate metric, the yield of fresh fruit bunches.
So when assessing the optimal planting density, you might see a shift from 25 to 30 tons per hectare if the spacing perfectly matches the soil's water retention, and Sowit.jl tracked those shifts accurately across the different soil types.
Yes, it did. It did struggle slightly with predicting the exact dry weight of the trunk, overestimating it in some blocks and underestimating in others.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the dry matter partitioning to the structural wood still needs some refinement. However, its predictions for fruit production and trunk height were remarkably solid. But there was one anomaly in the validation data that really demands our attention.
I saw this, and initially it seemed completely backward to me. The data showed that the model was significantly more accurate at predicting crop yields during severe dry weather, specifically during El Nino events, than it was during wet, optimal weather like La Nina.
It is a brilliant paradox of biological modeling.
But why would a model struggle more when the palm is perfectly happy and well watered? Shouldn't a healthy plant be more predictable?
You would think so, but when a palm is facing a severe water deficit, survival mechanisms take over. These mechanisms are physical, hardwired, and highly predictable.
So the soil dries out, the water potential drops, the stomata on the leaves physically close to prevent water loss, photosynthesis halts, and growth completely stalls.
Exactly. A drought imposes a harsh physical boundary on the system, and math equations are exceptionally good at calculating hard boundaries.
That makes total sense. When there is no water, the palm has no choices. It just shuts down. But during a La Nina event, when the soil profile is saturated and the sun is shining, all the physical constraints are removed.
Right. When resources are abundant, the palm has surplus energy and biological chaos takes over. The physiology becomes incredibly complex.
Because it has options now.
Yes. Does the palm use that extra energy to expand its root network? Does it push out more vegetative fronds? Or does it initiate more female inflorescences?
The internal hormonal triggers that dictate whether a palm decides to push fruiting activity or abort female flowers during optimal conditions are incredibly intricate and not entirely mapped out yet.
Precisely. The abundance of resources creates a multitude of biological pathways, making it harder for a math equation to guess which path the palm will choose.
To improve yield simulations during those perfect weather years, the model will eventually need to incorporate deeper hormonal and physiological triggers.
It will. But for an estate manager dealing with climate volatility, the fact that Sawit.jl is highly accurate at predicting the disastrous floor of a drought is arguably more valuable than perfectly predicting the ceiling of a boom year.
I completely agree. So let's bring all of this out of the research paper and directly into the field. What are the operational takeaways for the professionals listening right now?
Well, the first clear instruction is that planting density cannot be a copy-paste standard across your entire estate.
It absolutely cannot. Sawit.jl proves that the optimal density is entirely dynamic based on soil texture and regional hydrology.
Exactly. If you're planting on a sandy ultisol that drains rapidly, pushing for a high density of 148 palms per hectare might look good on a spreadsheet. But the concurrent soil evaporation and intense root competition in the top 40% of the soil profile will artificially induce drought stress even during normal rainfall.
You might actually produce more total oil per hectare by dropping your density to 128 palms, allowing the individual root systems to expand without competing, while aggressively managing your cover crops to eliminate bare soil evaporation in the wider avenues.
On the flip side, if you're planting on a heavy clay inceptazole that holds water brilliantly, the mechanistic model might show that you can safely tighten your spacing without hitting a water bottleneck, maximizing your land utilization.
The second operational takeaway relates to fertilizer. With the updated tenor and nitrogen mapping, managers need to start relying on legacy feeding schedules built decades ago.
They absolutely do. The modern tenera has a very specific metabolic tax.
Right, and if you aren't calculating your applications based on the actual maintenance respiration of the modern genetics, combined with regular soil testing to verify uptake, you are leaking cash through over-application or sacrificing yield through hidden starvation.
These mechanistic insights move us away from farming by tradition and toward farming by precision. And really, this is just the beginning of where this technology is heading.
That is the perfect thought to leave our listeners with today, because right now, running a model like Sawit.jl requires plugging in historical weather data and static soil lab results.
Yeah, it's a bit manual.
But the agricultural industry is rapidly moving toward live data integration. Imagine a near future where this biological engine is hooked up directly to IoT soil moisture sensors buried throughout your blocks, communicating with real-time AI weather forecasts.
It completely transforms the plantation from a static field into a dynamic, responsive system.
A system where you aren't waiting until the end of the month to evaluate your water stress. The digital twin of your estate is calculating the concurrent canopy and soil evaporation by the minute, warning you that the Rubisco kinetics are about to stall due to a forecasted temperature spike.
And automatically recommending a precise adjustment to your irrigation or fertilizer scheduling before the palm ever shows a single symptom of stress.
That level of foresight is going to redefine what it means to be a successful estate manager in the next decade. Evaluate your planting densities against your specific soil profiles, update your nutritional programs for the modern tenera, and get ready for a much more precise future.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening.